Welcome, everyone. This is Katie Prezes, Director of Research and Operations here at Birchworks. Thank you for joining us today. Our marketing research team, Carla Ahern and Kit Nordmark, will be delving into career planning strategies for marketing research and consumer insights professionals. I want to review a few quick logistics items before we start. First, all of your phones and microphones are muted. We'll be collecting questions, though, for a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation, which you can submit to me via the chat function on the left-hand side of your screen. If you experience any technical issues, submit those through the chat box, too. Finally, today's session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel within a day or two. So if you missed part of it or would like to share it with a colleague, you are welcome to do that. Now I'll introduce today's speakers, who I'm sure many of you already know. Both Carla and Kit began their careers in the marketing research world as researchers before moving into recruiting. Carla Ahern began her career working on-site at Quaker as a project manager for IRI before moving to Knowledge Networks, now GfK, where she focused on custom research initiatives in the media, CPG, and pharmaceuticals industries. Prior to Birchworks, she led business development and digital media effectiveness programs for Dime Store Media. Kit Nordmark worked in the marketing research industry with a focus in qualitative research, most recently at Kantar Futures, previously known as the Futures Company. Earlier in her career, Kit worked at True, a boutique insights firm that specialized in youth research. Well, that's all I have for the moment. Over to you, Carla and Kit.
Thanks so much, Katie. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today to hear a bit about our perspective on marketing research career planning. Gone are the days that marketing research professionals land an internship and end up retiring with the same company. It's more important than ever to manage your career and make sure you're making mindful and strategic decisions along the way. Before we dig into the meat of our discussion, we want to take a few minutes to cover some of the trends that we're tracking these days. It's no surprise that the world is moving and changing faster than ever, and there's been disruption in many industries as the consumer landscape evolves and businesses work to adjust. Who would have ever guessed that a leading tech-based e-commerce company would purchase America's healthiest grocery store? Amazon acquiring Whole Foods would have seemed like a far-fetched idea in the past, but today it's just another headline demonstrating how the world around us is shifting. Across industries, these kinds of changes have been impacting companies as well as the marketing researchers who serve them, whether internally as a consumer insights team within the organization or externally in the form of research suppliers, consultancies, or agencies. It'll be interesting to see what the next major headline is. We've seen lots of growth within industries such as technology, e-commerce, entertainment, and gaming. Those areas are thriving, and it appears the momentum will continue. On the other side, the consumer packaged goods industry has been cooling off. CPG used to be the golden industry for marketing research professionals, and it was an aspirational category for many in our field. But today, CPG has continued to struggle as consumer habits change. Some companies have found it more difficult to maintain growth and uncover new sources of revenue with the changing landscape, and many have been forced to lay off employees or dramatically restructure their organizations to help improve the bottom line. While CPG is still a wonderful experience to have under your belt because it's so transferable to other industries, the opportunities in the space just aren't as prevalent as they once were. As the marketing research industry adjusts to the world around it, hiring on the client side has really picked up at the junior end. The strategy for many organizations these days seems to be recruiting more talent on the junior side of things, which is great news for those at the early end of their careers. On the other side, though, the newer take on hiring more researchers on the junior side has led to a less is more strategy for senior level roles. Today, there tend to be fewer positions for those leading research teams. So as now more senior level professionals are competing for fewer leadership roles on the client side, it's really created a scramble for top level positions as new opportunities open up. On the supplier side, the industry continues to experience an interesting change as corporate clients continue to expect more out of their partnerships with their suppliers. Supplier-side researchers that are flexible and more nimble continue to have an advantage when competing with the large legacy suppliers because they can often provide a more customized and consultative approach with their clients. Firms that go the extra mile and are able to serve as an extension of their clients' research teams are often the ones who are thriving today. And new marketing research technologies are continuing to surface as clients who buy research often look for the latest and greatest methodologies to tackle their business questions. There's an ongoing expectation to leverage new techniques and creative ways to gather insights. And unique technologies like virtual reality or eye tracking, advanced online communities, mobile solutions, even social media intelligence, they continue to set suppliers apart from their competition. So suppliers that continually adapt and evolve to offer enhanced methodologies can truly customize their insights programs and deliver actionable results quickly. Those are the ones that are continuing to succeed today. With some of the changes going on, we've observed two contrasting approaches to staffing research departments within client-side organizations. On one side of the coin, many large corporations have decided to opt for leaner insights teams just to be able to be a bit more nimble and smaller, showing a preference for that lean team. On the other side of the coin, though, some companies prefer to leverage a larger capability internally and build out a more comprehensive group of researchers, often beefing up at the junior end of the talent pool, as I just mentioned. It's really to be able to take on more research efforts in-house and be able to do more internally without having to rely on suppliers. And some examples coming right out of our Chicago backyard here, just thinking about some of the organizations as they're moving corporate-wide, company-wide to smaller teams overall. We've seen large legacy companies like ConAgra or Beam Suntory or Kraft Heinz actually move from their large, expansive campuses out in the suburbs and move those downtown. And also McDonald's has just begun construction on their brand new digs down in the West Loop neighborhood of Chicago. So we're seeing lots of changes at that level as well. As a potential side effect of the increase in leaner research teams, many companies seem to be placing a greater emphasis on soft skills when hiring. One explanation could be that within a smaller group, each individual makes a greater impact and can have a more significant effect on the morale when it's a smaller team. So having strong communication or the ability to work as part of a team may be some of the soft skills that are of increased importance today. We've noticed an increase in the steps many employers take to vet researchers before bringing them on board. Carla is going to cover some assignments and how those come to play during the interview process in a bit. But we're also seeing more companies leverage personality tests, assessments, and other tools that they use to gauge a researcher's competence, aptitude, and work style in advance. These have been becoming more common in the hiring process, so don't be surprised if you're asked to do one of these if you're in a job search anytime soon. In addition to looking for the soft skills, we've also noticed more hiring managers seeking researchers with specific skill sets. In general, overall, those with rich experience across a variety of industries and methodologies continue to be in very high demand, but we've also seen an increase in employers looking for professionals with specialty skill sets, whether it's voice of the customer or voice of the guest work. We've seen multicultural or clients looking for experience with niche populations. Digital expertise is coming up more often, or specific industry experience, whether it's restaurants or hospitality or gaming in particular. In addition, we've also noticed an influx of requests for researchers with global experience. And that, not just working on occasional projects with international markets, but someone who's really partnered and worked cross-functionally with teams around the world. We've only seen this trend growing, and it'll probably continue down the line as we just become a more global world altogether. So if you have the opportunity to gain some global experience, it could be a fantastic resume building opportunity down the line.
Perfect. Thanks, Kit. Hi, everyone. Carla here. So what does this all add up to? So the marketing research job market, it's an active one. In our recent study, we found that almost 1 out of every 5 marketing researchers changed jobs in the last year. And these are professionals changing companies, and so this data doesn't include internal promotions or moves within a current company. And the average tenure of a marketing researcher is right around 3 years. The good news is that the market should help to support all of these job changes. The BLS ranks market research as the 12th best business job and predicts an almost 19% employment increase from 2014 to 2024, which equates to roughly 92,000 new job openings. So good news for all of us on the line here.
So with all of this talk of switching jobs, you're probably asking yourself, when should I start looking for a new position? And to boil it down, one of the biggest signs you might want to look for a new role is if you just don't feel like you're learning new things anymore. No matter where you are in your career, senior, junior, in the middle, it's important to continue to learn and grow and expand your skill set, your experience, and your expertise to continue to improve your marketability down the line. If you find yourself feeling like you've hit a plateau or you're just not getting the opportunity to tackle new challenges anymore, it might be time to start looking around. Timing-wise, there's really no black and white answer though. It's certainly not expected that you're going to stay at one company for the entirety of your career though anymore. And don't get me wrong, you want to avoid an annual job change. You don't want to be seen as a serial job hopper. But it's perfectly fine to spend 2, 3, 4 years in a role. If you've been in the same position for 6 or 7 years, you might want to consider making a change around this time. Or if it's been closer to a decade, you'll probably want to stop and think about whether it might be time to try something new or expand your skill set. The key is to avoid getting complacent or getting to a point where you're simply coasting. You just want to make sure you're constantly putting yourself in a position to continue to grow, learn new things, and stay fresh. If you do get to that 10, 12, 15-year mark and you still haven't made a change, sometimes the pushback that we get from clients is, why have they not made a change? Or are they, afraid of new challenges? Are they not flexible? Are they not able to learn new things? So that may not be the case, but you just don't want those questions floating around in your potential, new companies' minds. It's important to make your moves strategically and wisely, though. Don't ever make a move just to make a move, but again, really think about your career planning long term. To use a research term, Kit and I throw this out a lot, we say, think about the white space on your resume and then how you can fill it. Is there an industry you haven't been exposed to? If all you've done in your career thus far is CPG, maybe it's time to give tech a try, or maybe it's time to give retail a try. Maybe there are new methodologies you could learn. If you're all syndicated, maybe are there opportunities where you could work on some custom projects? So as you think about your next move, it's also important to know that others are doing the same thing. And you need to think about how you can differentiate yourself during the interview process. So that's a good segue into a few things that we think are important to think about during the job interview process to help yourself stand out and land your next dream job. So even before you hop on an initial phone screen or step through the door for an in-person interview, your resume is going to be the first impression that a hiring manager or a recruiter or HR professional will have of you. So it's important to make sure that it's good. Outside of the basics, like making sure that you list a professional email address or ensuring that the formatting and spacing is visually appealing on your document, listing methodologies and industries you're familiar with, really take some time to truly think about the content and how you're presenting it. We often advise professionals to avoid having their resumes read like a job description. It can be tempting to virtually copy and paste the bullets of your job description, but we encourage using your resume as a tool to really showcase how your research has helped to move the business forward. This is something that's often a little bit easier to do when you're on the client side, because on the supplier side, you sometimes don't know exactly how your work was utilized or what was done with it, but include that detail when you can. Also be sure to call out progression throughout your various roles. If you were promoted twice at a company, be sure to denote that or call that out in some way, and don't only list the last position you held at the company. Potential employers love to see progression and promotions. And a common question we get around resumes, just as an aside here, is around length. If you're only a few years into your career, try to keep it to one page. But if you're more of a seasoned professional, don't worry about going on to a second page. And that might be necessary to include the types of detail that we're recommending here. And lastly, and this certainly does require some work, but try to tailor your resume to specific roles. It can help to have a few different versions of your resume. Your resume for a client-side role may emphasize different work experience, skills, traits than one for a supplier side or consulting role. And if the position is more of a global spin or perhaps calls out the need for previous management experience, be sure to highlight those parts of your background as well. Okay, so now for the main part, the actual interview. So before you hop on that initial call or walk through the door, we always recommend doing your homework on the company, the team, and the role. I know it sounds basic, but we often hear from our clients that they're disappointed that candidates haven't done any research prior to the interview, which is especially bad when you're interviewing for a research role. But be sure that you Google the company, any recent mergers, who their competitors are, things like that. If you're working with a recruiter, be sure to review any notes from conversations you have with them, or perhaps, and hopefully they'll set up a call to help prep you beforehand. The morning of the interview, pop the company into Google. Make sure that no news broke recently about them that perhaps could come up in the interview or be helpful to you to help kind of showcase your knowledge. And during the interview, be sure to ask well thought out questions. This shows that you've done your research and you're already thinking about yourself being in the role and kind of sitting in that seat. As long as they're well thought out, interviewers usually love answering questions, and it really helps you to get a clear picture of the environment and situation you could be walking into.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add there, we often have people meeting with a panel of interviewers or multiple people in one day. One of the great things to think about is having kind of an arsenal of questions in your back pocket. So try to have a variety of questions prepared just so you're ready to go. And in case the interviews do compare notes on the back end, they see some variety as well. It's not like you went in and asked the same question to everyone that you spoke with. So it's one of those things you can either tailor it to the specific person that you're talking to, their role if they're in a different side of the business, or really anything. Just vary it a bit. It helps make you stand out as well.
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. Good. And I guess the other kind of couple things that we wanted to mention are we recommend preparing a few anecdotes or stories of example projects that you're particularly proud of. I always joke, but practice them aloud in the shower or to your cat, to your roommates or your spouse when you're getting ready in the morning. But actually talking them through aloud really helps you to realize if there's any parts you stumble on or get stuck on. And it can just be very helpful to do a dry run and kind of really talk about projects that you were very intimately familiar with. And lastly, don't be afraid to show passion or enthusiasm. Clients want people who are excited about working there, so don't be afraid to let that shine through. And then lastly, after the interview, we recommend sending thank you notes when you can. Thank you notes are a great way to close out the process and reiterate your excitement and your interest. It's always great if you're able to personalize them a bit, and if you're able to reference a specific aspect of your conversation, that's even better. They can also be a great way to follow up and perhaps clarify any aspects of the conversation. If you weren't particularly happy with your answer to a question or something like that, it can sometimes, again, just help to close the loop there. And years ago, people used to snail mail these, and handwritten mail is certainly nice to have. But these days, the interview process moves pretty quickly, so we recommend emailing them and not snail mailing them.
The roll might be closed by the time the letter gets there. So.
Yes, good point. And as Kit alluded to before, in addition to or perhaps in lieu of the assessment phase, we're starting to see assignments being used more and more as part of the interview process. These will often come up after a phone screen and before an on-site interview, or sometimes they'll come up at the very end of the process after you've been on site. As these are popping up more and more, we thought it would be helpful to provide our perspective and a couple of tips for approaching these assignments. They will likely vary based on the company and the level for which you're interviewing, but there are a couple kind of common things to think about. First, make sure you dedicate enough time to complete the assignment. The time commitment can vary from an hour to upwards of 6 or even 10 hours over the course of a few days. But regardless of the length and the time commitment expected, just be sure to allot enough time and leave a buffer in case things take longer than expected. And be careful to pay attention to details and instructions before you start. We've received feedback from hiring managers that it was just very clear the applicant didn't fully read the instructions, and that's just a red flag right off the bat since we're such a detail-oriented industry. If the assignment includes a storytelling component or perhaps you're asked to write headlines based on the data, be sure to not only summarize findings concisely, but also go a step further to provide recommendations where you can to demonstrate your ability to connect the data to the business problem or objective. Again, try to take it a step further. And I know this sounds obvious, but be sure to check your work before submitting it. Attention to detail, again, it's very important. You want to make sure everything's buttoned up, and we've also gotten feedback that it wasn't clear. It was very clear, that the candidate did not QC their own work. And lastly, I know this may sound silly, but be sure to take the assignment seriously. there's a reason that the employer is having you complete it in the first place, and they will use it as part of their overall assessment of you as a candidate. We've seen this step make or break someone's candidacy, so if you're interested in the role, be sure to take all aspects of the interview process seriously.
All right, so Carla is going to be back in a minute to cover some marketing research salary trends. But before we get into that, we think it's important to also make sure we're clear on who we're talking about when we say marketing researchers. So the term marketing researchers, according to us, can include professionals within consumer insights, maybe customer insights, shopper insights, category management, media, audience research, or even competitive and market intelligence. At Birchworks, though, we differentiate marketing researchers from predictive analytics professionals and data scientists. Both of these groups have different skill sets and are covered in separate studies that we publish each year. These are either the folks that are hands-on with SAS or R, Python, Hadoop, kind of a different skill set there. We also don't include web analytics professionals who likely use Omniture or Google Analytics day in and day out. We have colleagues here at Birchworks who cover analytics, data science, and web analytics recruiting specifically, but we separate them from traditional marketing research. We also keep marketing and brand managers separate, since they're likely using insights or partnering closely with researchers, but tend to be a little bit further removed from the process itself.
So after all of the hard work that you've put into career planning, the job search, the interview process, assignments, assessments, and anything else that gets thrown your way, an important thing to know during the negotiation process is what salaries one might expect in marketing research. And again, this is a topic that you don't necessarily talk about with too many people, maybe your spouse, maybe your current employer, but other than that, it's usually kept pretty quiet. So we wanted to give you some benchmarks and high-level takeaways that we thought might be helpful. Looking at data from the most recent version of our salary study, you can see the median base salaries at all levels of the job levels we analyze. This is from our 2016 study that we released in the fall, and we'll be releasing our 2017 data before the end of the year. Client-side salaries are shown in the light blue bars, and supplier-side salaries are shown in the dark blue. The full breakdown, which can be found in our salary study, available for free download on our website. If you're not familiar with the report, we cut the data by client side versus supplier side and a number of other variables as well. A common question we get is, should I get an advanced degree? And it's a really tricky question, as it's a very personal decision because it's such a time commitment from both a time and a monetary perspective. But as you can see here, an advanced degree tends to command higher salaries for researchers. In this example, which looks at salaries for supplier-side researchers with at least 10 years of experience, a researcher with a master's degree earns about $10,000 more than those with a bachelor's, and those with an MBA earn an additional $10K. We don't usually see advanced degrees as a requirement for a role. They're normally more of a nice to have, so they can have their payoffs. And as you can see, again, sometimes it can pay off to have that additional degree, but of course it depends on your specific situation, your experience level, company, et cetera. And when looking at salaries by industry, marketing and advertising firms pay the highest salaries on the supplier side. When looking at supplier-side professionals with at least 10 years of experience, advertising and marketing firms paid nearly $25,000 more than traditional research suppliers. When you're considering your options, there are certainly pros and cons to consider beyond salary when you're comparing roles at a traditional supplier versus a marketing and advertising firm. And regardless of which side you're considering, you should know and really ask questions such as, what clients will I be working with? How many clients will I be responsible for? What methodologies will I be using? Will I be exposed to? What role does research play in the organization, and does it truly have a seat at the table? And these are all questions that will affect your day-to-day. And so whatever you do, try to put yourself in the position to learn as much as you can in any opportunity that you pursue. When looking at the client side, there are also variances based on industry. When looking at data for the more junior client-side researchers, which includes up to 4 years of experience, the higher salaries tend to be in retail and tech, but the highest salaries are seen in CPG, which are about $15,000 more than other industries. So with all of this talk about compensation, we wanted to provide some tips about advocating for yourself and reasonably negotiating salaries, which Kit is going to walk you through.
All right. So regardless of your level of experience, everyone wants more money at the end of the day, right? So how do you get there? So we pulled together some tips to think about when you're, I don't know, maybe entering into a salary negotiation. One of the first things to think about is transparency. It's important to be honest, whether you're working with a recruiter, talent acquisition, HR, or even a hiring manager directly. Be open about your current salary and full compensation, as well as what you'd be willing to accept. We know some are hesitant to disclose compensation information, especially when marketing researchers feel they may be underpaid at the moment, but knowing the full story really helps us advocate for you. For example, we worked with a professional a few weeks ago who happened to be under market value in his current role. He had a strong background and was able to demonstrate his value to the organization, and because we knew his current salary information and what his market value should be, we were able to make a strong case for him, and he ended up receiving an offer with a nice bump. So ultimately increasing his base from the low 50s to into the 70s. Some job seekers toy with the idea of embellishing their current salary, but we do not recommend lying. You could run the risk of pricing yourself out of a really great opportunity or something you'd be really excited about, or worse, if a company asks for a pay stub to confirm your compensation, you could actually get caught in a pretty sticky situation. So I just mentioned market value a couple of times. As you think about negotiating, it's good to have an idea of your current market value. Carla went over some high-level salary trends just a minute ago, but our annual salary study has even more info and can be a great starting point to get a good sense for your value in the market and where you fall today.
Kit, didn't you have someone yesterday say he brought the salary study?
Yes, he brought it to the HR, his HR person in his company, and it was one of those that can prove to be very useful for all different sides.
Yeah.
Yes, so we'll be updating that in the fall, but you can also get last year's available on our website for free. And so one thing that may impact negotiation is internal salary bands. And if you're not aware of these, sometimes various levels within an organization might have specific salary ranges assigned to them. And this is especially true within larger organizations. So if the company you're negotiating with has internal salary bands, no matter how much they want to hire you, if you're the perfect candidate, or even if a hiring manager is singing your praises and is really trying to get you on board, there may be a ceiling that they can simply not exceed. So it's good to have an understanding of these potential limitations going in. If you find yourself getting to the point where you need to consider making a trade-off or that kind of thing for a role you really want, or that could be a great opportunity, you just need to be prepared for that. And whether you're in the offer stage with a new potential job opportunity, or if you want to have a discussion with your current employer about maybe getting an increase, you want to be prepared with specific reasons and examples to support why you think you deserve the amount you're targeting. Think about what you can demonstrate the value you bring to the team or show the impact you've had in the past. It can also be beneficial to highlight your diverse experience. So think about the breadth of data you've worked with, the different methodologies you've mastered, the various industries or categories you've touched, all of those things that we talked about when it comes to the white space on your resume and making sure you've touched a lot of different areas. That hands-on experience across a spectrum of work can really help support your discussion. One high-level point we want to mention is that for marketing researchers, lateral moves are actually fairly common. It may not be the norm with some other industries, but we often see research and insights professionals take a lateral move or even a potential step back at some point in their career, to break into a new industry or to fill some white space on their resume. As we've talked about a few times already, it's a great idea to make strategic moves throughout your career, and it really can pay off in the long run if you diversify your experience along the way. For example, if you've spent your whole career in a B2B role, maybe consider trying to make that transition over to B2C to build out that skill set. Or you could take a lateral to gain exposure to a new industry if you've only been working with CPG. We also see supplier-side researchers take a step back salary-wise to make that jump over to a client-side research team. That's a desirable and aspirational move for many, to get into a client-side organization, to be able to see how to strategically impact the business and that kind of thing. There's a ton of perks that go along with that. And making that jump to the client side might require taking a step back. And it might seem counterintuitive at first, but it often pays off significantly in the long run. When you're negotiating, it's not always just about the base salary. Some companies may not have wiggle room with the base, or they might have limitations based on internal equity or those salary bands I just mentioned. It's important to evaluate the entire opportunity. Maybe the company can't adjust the base salary, but they might have another lever to pull, Maybe in the form of extra vacation days or a sign-on bonus or another area where they may have some flexibility. And beyond the monetary benefits and job perks, it's always a good idea to be thinking about the opportunity as a whole, so including the actual role and the position. As you're planning your career and making strategic decisions about the moves you make along the way, don't forget to consider the opportunity for learning, for the growth potential in a certain role, or the ability to really build out your resume. These things will likely be worth more long-term than a couple $1,000s in your pocket right now.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kit. We really can't stress enough how important it is to plan your career long term. It's just sort of a different market and a different way of approaching it nowadays. And as Kit talked about, again, sort of it's a great example. If you only have B2B experience, perhaps taking a step back, getting some consumer experience, that might be a wonderful move. You just want to make sure you're not potentially limiting your future career options. Again, just for perhaps taking a step back a few $1,000s. It could potentially and hopefully will pay off longer term.
When it comes to jobs, negotiating here, it's not like buying a house or a used car where you negotiate and never see that person again. It's a completely different ballgame when you're communicating with your future boss or potential employer. It's even more important in this case to negotiate tactfully because if you think about it, you're already starting to build relationships, and these might last for years. These are the people you're going to be working with and sitting in meetings with. So you want to be kind of cognizant with that as you approach this. Negotiation can be a pretty sensitive topic. If you're really excited about an opportunity and decide you'd like to negotiate, it is important not to draw a line in the sand. So some give and take is almost always necessary, and if you come off as standing super firm, like you don't have any flexibility at all, there is a chance at the end of the day the company will walk away. One thing to consider, if you decide to negotiate and if the employer is able to come back and meet your needs, you really need to be ready to accept the offer. It often takes a lot of work on the employer's end, and they often have to get multiple levels of approvals and talk to different teams and that kind of thing to try to accommodate your requests. And nothing leaves a more sour taste in their mouth is if they put a ton of work behind it and then you decline the offer anyway. So just really be thinking about that as you navigate these waters. And in a competitive market like today's, you might find yourself in a place where you have multiple offers on the table. We've actually seen this quite a bit recently. And that can be tricky to navigate as well. So we really recommend from the very start being very transparent, kind of going back to that transparency bullet that I first started with. But being honest with your recruiter or potential employer, if you be open about the timing, the offers that you have on the table, communicating along the way really is crucial. If you do leverage one offer against another, it's important to be transparent about the salary and compensation you've been offered. At this stage in the game, whatever company you turn down will likely be pretty disappointed. So being transparent along the way helps ensure there aren't any surprises, and it also helps you explain your thought process as you go throughout the process, just so it eases the letdown a bit on their end, just when they know where you're coming from. And one thing, kind of back to that transparency bullet with your recruiter, if you're talking to Carla and me, or if you're working on a job opportunity, it's always great to keep us in the loop as far as other opportunities you have going on or other things in your pipeline. Being honest about this on the front end can help so much. Timing can be so tricky here and so important. Being upfront about other things you have going on, if another opportunity is moving quickly, let us know that so we can keep the other company apprised. And if they're able to speed up the process to accommodate timing, we'll see what they can do. But it's great to know that on the front end.
And I know a lot of people are hesitant to do that, and they kind of want to keep their cards kind of close. But But in reality, it actually even makes you look more attractive as a candidate. I mean, if you have multiple companies going after you. So again, I think we've said transparency a dozen times in the last few minutes, but it's true. It actually can make you look even more attractive. And we had an instance just a couple of weeks ago where a candidate did have another offer, and we were able to relay all of those details to our client, and sure enough, they were able to pull some strings on the back end, make things happen even quicker, and she ended up getting an even better offer and ended up accepting it. So it can really play to your favor.
Mm-hmm. And then finally here, never accept an offer unless your decision is final. So we know occasionally people make mistakes, but it's never a good idea to get to that point of accepting and signing on the dotted line until you've fully considered the offer, you've gone through all the details, and are really ready to turn down all other offers. And that includes a potential counter from your current employer. We know counteroffers can be really appealing, but we often find that most who take a counteroffer are not in that role 9 months down the line anyway. So it's kind of that interesting situation where if you take a counter, your company already knows you're ready to jump ship. If they couldn't meet or give you a bump before, what is stopping them now, or what levers did they pull? What changed really? It's really a slippery slope. If you take that counter, you already have one foot out the door. If you weren't happy before and are looking, what is a little money going to fix at the end of the day? So I don't know. We see counters as really being more of a temporary fix than a long term. And so I don't know. It's just one of those things. We often, if you're ready, excited to take on a role, go for it all the way.
Yeah.
All right. So that pretty much covers the job search process from end to end. Hope you found some of these tips helpful, and we really wish you all the best in your search. And as always, Carla and I are here if you want to set up a call, strategize about your career planning. We love to talk. So
yeah.
Very good. And handing it back over to you, Katie.
Thanks, guys. Those are really great insights, so really appreciate you taking the time. If those of you who are listening are interested in more insights like this about the marketing research hiring market, like what Kit and Carla have shared today, check out birchworks.com/blog, where we post periodic updates with talent market insights and analysis, including industry trends, career topics, shifts we're seeing in the market, and excerpts from our salary research reports. And also to stay connected and updated on our latest research, webinars, career advice, you can find Birchworks on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, so be sure to follow us there. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Birchworks is an executive recruiting firm specializing in the placement of quantitative business professionals, typically within the fields of marketing research, analytics, and data science. We're the leading resource for quantitative talent and insights and produce a number of comprehensive salary reports every year for our main specialty areas. And each of these reports contain more than 30 pages of data and can be downloaded for free at birchworks.com/study. I've been receiving a lot of questions about salaries and how they vary by location or level or client or supplier side. All of that is available in our marketing research salary report, which we released about 6 months ago. So like I said, be sure to go to birchworks.com/study. You can download it, the PDF, right from there for free. Okay, so time to jump into Q&A. We definitely have some time, so feel free to continue submitting your questions through the chat box, and I'll do my best to field them for you. But let's dive right in, Kit and Carla. I received a couple questions about exactly how do I update my LinkedIn profile or start networking without letting kind of the world know that I'm interested in moving. Obviously, I don't want my current company to think I'm looking around. Is a resume good enough, or how important is it that my LinkedIn profile is up to date?
Got it. Those are both really good questions. I guess starting with the LinkedIn side of things. First thing, there are settings on LinkedIn that you can adjust just so if you go in and make a ton of changes, your network isn't alerted with each of those. So I would say first thing, maybe go in and check your settings there just to make sure that you're not sending an alert every time you update your profile picture and that kind of thing. But going back to that importance of LinkedIn, we would say it's very important. Right now, if you're a recruiter or a hiring manager, even if you have a resume on your desk, almost always are people checking LinkedIn, especially in the research field. We're researchers. We want to see everything that we can. So it's really important to make sure that you are on LinkedIn, that you are, have a bunch of content on there to really show your background and demonstrate who you are as a professional. If you're worried about your boss noticing, one thing to consider is to just make sure your profile is always up to date. And that doesn't mean updating it every single week or anything like that. It's really more just making sure, as you take on new roles, maybe you get a promotion, that kind of thing, update it a little bit as you go along, just so you're never, one day doing a complete overhaul. So that's one of the ways. If your boss checked you out when they hired you and they kind of know what you have going on. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah.
Also, make sure that your LinkedIn is fairly consistent with your resume. So, it doesn't need to be word for word, but you want to make sure that your titles are the same and that the tenure at each of your positions reflects what's on your resume as well. It's one of those things if there's a ton of discrepancies or if things don't match up, that can be a potential red flag. So that's another way just to make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date with what you're sending out in form of resume. And I guess one other point, I'm kind of just rambling now.
No, that's good. No.
When it comes to
Great.
what to include, so we often, if we start a new role and we're looking for someone that has innovation experience or global work that we talked about is kind of a trend right now, we'll put those words right into LinkedIn just to look around to see who's out there. So it's really great when you think about it, making sure that your LinkedIn has content as far as the types of work you've done, maybe the methodologies you've worked on. If you're an innovation expert, make sure that reads loud and clear. It's always kind of funny to us when we talk to someone who on paper doesn't look like they have any experience in a specific area, and then when we're on the phone with them, maybe they worked on extensively in that spot. So it's really great. Just kind of think about those specific words as far as methodologies, skill sets, breakdown, quantitative, that can take a lot of different forms. So don't be afraid to get specific.
And as Kit mentioned, just to give you a little insight into how we work, that's something that we do, but that's certainly not exclusive to us. There's internal recruiters within companies that are hiring that are doing the same thing too. So if you have an updated LinkedIn profile, it's one less barrier that they have to kind of work around to get more information about you. So you may as well put it out there.
Perfect. Thank you. You guys were talking a little bit about being transparent with your salary, and we received a ton of questions about that. Specifically, a couple people asked, big corporations, they have the online form you have to fill out with your application, and it asks for salary. It's a required field to even submit your application. Someone was asking, what do you think you should put in there? Should you aim high? Should you aim low in order to, entice HR to actually get back to you? And then someone else was asking or saying that they had been taught never to reveal their salary or their desired salary with a hiring manager until you're actually made an offer. So at what point do you really need to be transparent, before the offer or after?
Well, I don't know. The second half of that is a little easier, so we'll dive into that first. I know everyone has different viewpoints on this, and if you asked half a dozen people, I'm sure you'd get half a dozen different answers. But from our perspective, we always say be transparent from the get-go and be honest from the get-go about your salary. The thing, if you skip ahead, the interview process nowadays can take anywhere from 6 weeks to several months. And if you go through that entire process, and I've talked to professionals who have told me very similar stories where they go through this process. It took 4 months. They took time off of work. They hopped on a plane. You go through that process, and at the end of the day, you're $30,000 away from where their target salary is. All of a sudden, you're left with a sour taste in your mouth. The company is a little bit bitter, and no one's happy. So our perspective is always just be transparent. And it's fine, to say this is where I am, but this is where I'd like to be. If you're kind of drawing a line in the sand, you can be a little bit more firm about that. So everyone, again, is on the same page. But from our perspective, it doesn't make any sense to go down the path of interviewing if, again, there's going to be no kind of meeting in the middle and no one's going to be happy with the salary at the end of the day. So again, transparency is key. The other thing is, they could be so happy with you, maybe they can do a little bit of a sign-on, as Kit was alluding to earlier. Sometimes there are levers that clients can pull or use, even if there are internal salary bands. But again, transparency is key. That's just it. I've talked to a lot of people who have just been quite angry, or just, again, they have that really sour taste in their mouth because no one talked about salary from the get-go.
Well, and oftentimes at the point when an offer is on the table, oftentimes, especially when you're working with a recruiter, the negotiation goes on before that point. So it really is crucial to be transparent in advance because many companies, once an offer is out, they may not have any wiggle room then because then they have to take it back to finance or different areas to get a stamp of approval, and it just would, take 3 extra weeks. You just never know. So, I think really by the time an offer is on the table, it should be fairly close to where you'd like to land.
Yeah, there really shouldn't be any surprises at that stage in the game. And then kind of going back to the latter part of that question, which is the online forms. And, again, we really sound like we're beating a dead horse here, but we'd say, again, be transparent. And every form is different, and every sort of online portal is different. So, there might be fields where you can put in your current salary. There might be another field where you can put in your desired salary. And we get questions like this all the time. Again, we'd say be pretty transparent. If you are a very seasoned professional, maybe on the supplier side, you'd like to get to the client side, it's perfectly fine to put your current salary and then even give a salary range that's slightly below where you are just to show you want to make that move. So again, we just say be honest. We like transparency and we don't like surprises. And I think that kind of goes for anyone who's been in a hiring situation or been involved with the negotiation process.
And I think if there is the option, all forms are a little bit different, but if there is the option to provide a range versus a steadfast number, I think, instead of just putting 130 flat, if you could put 125 to 150, it might actually, open up some windows there. So they don't all have that option, but something to consider.
Good. Thank you. You guys touched on this a little bit, but a lot of salary questions today. Do most employers expect that you will negotiate after their first offer? Like, should you plan that you're going to ask for more money after the initial number comes out? What do you guys think about that?
That's a good situation. That's a good question, and I think every situation is a little bit different too. As Kit said, if you're working with a third-party recruiter, hopefully they've explained to you that most of the negotiations are happening on the back end, and your salary's been presented from the get-go. It falls within the range. That's kind of all of those basics have been worked out, and then kind of trusting that Kit or me is going to advocate for you and really do the negotiation behind the scenes. Hopefully that's how it goes. And companies and clients that we work with, they really like to present their best and final offer. There's so much work that happens behind the scenes, and they really hate going back and forth and getting approvals. And they really just like to, again, come to you and say, this is what we can do. We hope you'll join us. This is our best and final. If you're in a marketing research sales role or something like that, it's probably a little bit of a different situation. They might actually want to see you demonstrate your sales and your negotiation skills, so there might be a little bit more leeway there to negotiate. And on the flip side, if you're working sort of independently by yourself, that might be a little bit of a different story too, kind of based on what's been communicated, and if you're working with the hiring manager directly, if you're working with HR directly, and what's been told to you. So again, that's a slightly different situation too, and you might do a little bit more advocating for yourself if you don't have someone like Kit or me doing it for you, if that makes sense.
Great. We received a couple questions about kind of the interview process. One of which was, what is the best way to ask a potential employer about work-life balance without seeming unwilling to work extra hours? I feel like we get that.
That's a really good question. We get that one all the time. I think the first thing before we even attempt to answer this one, make sure you don't ask this at like the very first phone screen or very early on in the process, because we see this all the time. Potential employers come to us and they're like, I don't know, it seems like they're really not happy where they are right now, and all they're concerned about is work-life balance. And so I think it's one of those kind of delicate issues that you probably don't want to start to uncover until a little bit later on in the process.
And there might be ways of asking it, kind of like backdoor asking it, instead of saying, what is the work-life balance? Ask questions about the culture and the values and things like that that might help you kind of get an answer to those questions without being kind of so blunt about it, if you will. I think there's kind of a tactful way of asking anything. And honestly, hopefully as the interview process goes on, hopefully that's revealed to you, and you can, sort of when you get to those later stages with, your potential new boss or the hiring manager, you can kind of ask those delicate questions. And, maybe if you're a new mom or a new dad or something like that, kind of have that open and honest conversation. Again, it's just, I think, kind of setting the expectations from the get-go, where if, you're a gym rat and every Tuesday you've got a yoga class that you've got to attend at 6:30, maybe working that into the conversation too. Who knows, maybe that potential new boss loves yoga too, and then again, you've had another opportunities to build some rapport. So I think it's just tactful ways of asking it, and again, like Kit said, maybe not on the initial phone screen. And if you're working with a recruiter, ask them. I can't guarantee that they're going to know, but if it's a client of theirs that they have worked with for a long time and they know that there's flexibility to work from home on Friday or something like that, or they're totally cool with you coming in at 9:30 if you have a doctor's appointment, leaving a little bit early if you live far away, they'll share that information with you if you can. So utilize all the resources that you can and have.
Great. What about someone asked if they go through the interview process, they ultimately don't get the job? Is it appropriate to ask for kind of a debrief of why you didn't get the job from the employer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely ask. And again, every situation is different, and sort of your internal point of contact is probably going to be different. So it's always worth asking. And again, researchers are curious, so they're going to want to know. And it's a fair question. I mean, did I not have the skills, or was it just not a fit, or was I lacking in some area? Is there an area I can work on in the future? Those are all very fair things to want to know. Even in our roles, I mean, sometimes we get really detailed feedback. Other times we don't.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a little bit hard to say. If you are able to get feedback, and obviously if you're working with a recruiter, that can be a little bit easier. And we always try to provide as much feedback as possible, because we know it can be so helpful as you're interviewing and kind of, evolving throughout the process there, like figuring out where you can spend more time or show more focus or that kind of thing. But it is also fairly common for companies just to make their decision, and we don't always get a ton of detail. So I think it's one of those things. Closure is great, but yeah, you can't always expect it, but great to have when you do get it, and great to kind of tweak your interviewing skills along the way.
Cool. We're already a few minutes over, but we received so many good questions, and there's still a ton of people listening. So I'm going to do 2 more questions, and then we're going to cut us off here. So I got a couple questions about thank you notes, so after interviews. The one was, if I didn't get a chance to grab somebody's card, what's the best way to ask for that email address? And then if I met with like 9 or 10 people, do I really have to send thank you notes to all of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, yeah, that's certainly sort of our general overarching recommendation, but there's definitely exceptions to kind of all the rules, and always think about your individual situation. So if you've met with a dozen or even 7, 8 interviewers, use discretion when sending thank you notes, and maybe only send to a few key decision makers or potentially your HR contact in addition. Usually, you'll phone interview with one person and then go to an on-site interview with anywhere from 2 to 6 people. In that situation, it's a little bit more manageable, but we'd still advise you to send however many you feel is appropriate based on the time spent with the person and then the nature of the meeting with each person as well. And we know that you don't always have access to everyone's email address. I mean, that's kind of best case scenario. But we know you don't always receive business cards from people, or maybe you're dealing with an online portal and you're really kind of just dealing with this automated system. And sometimes companies don't feel like giving out contact information, or they're really careful about giving out a hiring manager's email address. So we know it's not always possible. If you have a recruiting or an HR contact, they could forward it for you. And that's completely acceptable to ask them to do that on your behalf. I mean, it's hopefully just a click of a button for them.
Yeah, I think everything Carla mentioned is right on, and sometimes you just can't do it. Sometimes it's just not possible. It's one of those things you rarely would get dinged for not doing a thank you. It's more just gravy at this point. So if you do have the means and are able to, sending tailored thank you notes that are specific to the conversations can really set you apart and go a long way. But don't beat yourself up if you're not able to do it, because sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah.
Great. And we received a couple questions about working with recruiters. So how exactly does Birchworks help job seekers find the right fit? And can I work with multiple recruiters?
Yes, you can absolutely work with multiple recruiters. It kind of goes by way of networking too. We always suggest, get your name out there, do as much as you can, cast a wide net. So it's completely fine if you have relationships with 2, 3, 5 recruiters. It doesn't really matter. For the most part, we work with our clients to help find roles. So it's great to get your name out there because we might have something that comes across our desk that might be a perfect fit with you. And if we've had a conversation already, we know you might be a great person to reach out to for a specific role. So absolutely talk to multiple recruiters and make those connections.
And another thing to kind of think about is timing. And the process, it's not as if you say, okay, I'm ready for a new role, and then you snap your fingers and there's half a dozen roles that are perfect in your in your specific location. So again, it's kind of getting ahead of things and kind of making sure that you're proactive and again, kind of start dipping your toe in the proverbial water before you need to start looking. And it's just a good mindset to be in. If you're not in a time crunch, you're more in the driver's seat. You're able to make very well thought out strategic decisions. And this is, I think a lot of people find this interesting, but a lot of the folks that Kit and I and the professionals that Kit and I end up placing in new roles or, believe it or not, relatively happy in their previous roles. But because they were open-minded, they were able to land a new role that came to them that was an even better opportunity for them in the long run. So, we talk to a lot of people who are quite happy but open-minded, not necessarily the people who are out of work or very disgruntled. So I think it's just being proactive for yourself and advocating for yourself too. And like Kit said, yeah, definitely, we don't get all the roles out there by any means. So talk to multiple recruiters. We're completely in favor of that. Keep your network open because again, we're contacted, as Kit explained, by our clients to help them fill specific roles. And so those are generally the roles that we're going after. But again, the other side of our role, which we really love, is talking to professionals day in and day out, and again, kind of keeping them top of mind, following them throughout their careers.
Yep. So it's almost better to have our conversations, at least the initial one, way before you even think about making a move. So.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you to everyone for submitting questions. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see the roles that we have available right now that are a fit for your experience or discuss hiring needs, if you're a hiring manager, please feel free to send us an email at info@birchworks.com. We'd be happy to start the process with you. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day.